and welcome to another edition of the Manifestation Method podcast. I'm so excited today because I have Abby with me. Now, I came across Abby, I guess a couple of months ago. So what happened was I joined a Facebook group for retreats because many of you know that I'm running a retreat. I'm actually flying out tomorrow to go and do my recce in Thailand for my retreat, which I'm very excited about. And so I started joining a few groups just to see what other people were doing and getting some advice. And I came across this group and the advice was flowing thick and fast. And I was like, this is amazing. And then I looked and there was 100,000 people in this group and this is insane. Anyway, that was about maybe a month ago. And I just looked this morning and there's 110,000 people in this group. Anyway, the lady who runs this group is Abby. And so I thought I have to talk to this lady. So when she was keen to do a podcast chat, I was like, yes, I have to have her on. So that is how I got to know Abby. So if you don't know who I am, my name is Hayley. I'm a manifestation coach, mentor, teacher, whatever you like to call me. I'm not really fussy. I just like helping women to get whatever it is that they want, So that is my thing. I think that we should all live our best lives and live a life that makes us happy. And I want to help women to do that, okay? Whatever that may be. So I have an online course, I run retreats, a lot of different things, but whatever it takes to get you to the next step of creating a life that you love, that's kind of what I'm about. So today we're going to be chatting to Abby and I'm going to hand over to her so she can introduce herself because that's way more exciting than me just reading a bio for you. So hi, Abby. Thanks for coming on. And do you want to just introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you for having me. My name's Abby Williams. I live in California. Actually, it was one of my dreams to live in California as a child. And what I didn't know then was I started manifesting things really young because I was just going after what I wanted and hoping and dreaming, really. So I come from a really small town in Pennsylvania. My parents always encouraged me to get educated and follow my dreams, and I did that. I majored in theater and Spanish actually in college, and then got married, moved to California in my 20s, and pursued my acting career, did some performing, and then always knew that I wanted to live in Latin America. Knew that I wanted to do something big in the world and make a difference. And so I run a nonprofit called Lantern Hill. The US side of that is called Friends of Lantern Hill. And that's just one of the many things that I do. And now, after all these years of running a nonprofit and having a lot of kids and giving and giving and giving, I realized at one point that, okay, this isn't the healthiest way to live. I have to take care of myself too. And I just started kind of going through this recovery process and health focus on wellness and mental health. And just because you can manifest things, I think sometimes you have to think about what you really want to manifest.
Of course.
Right? Because that'll happen. And so I got everything I ever wanted.
Yeah.
But it was a lot.
Yeah.
And I didn't always take care of myself. And so I started thinking, before I even knew that women's wellness retreats were a really big deal in the world, I knew that that's what I wanted to do next, was kind of transition from nonprofit world. And I'm also a creative person. I make things and I sell them. And so now I'm sort of going into this women's wellness retreats world, and didn't mean to, but here I have a group of 110,000 people. And so I asked for a sign and I got it.
That's a massive sign. That's a massive sign. But I think,
and now I don't know what I'm going to do next.
That just goes to show that when you follow and do what you love, everything follows, everything just flows from there because you're putting all your intention into it. And you're like, oh, this is fun. I want to make this work. And then boom, 110,000 people later, you're helping all of these women. So, I mean, for me, as someone who, I've done retreats before, but there's so much knowledge and wealth that you can gain from all these women in this amazing space. And everyone is very supportive and shares things. And it's really good. It's great. I just feel like you're not out there on your own. And that's a credit to you because you've curated and created this space where women feel like they can do that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I always felt called to do in my life was bring people together.
Mhm.
From a very young age, my mom jokingly said that I should have been born in the 60s because I would have been fighting for civil rights and, race relations and people in poverty and social justice. And so those are really important things to me. And I think women, especially, can make great changes in the world
Mhm.
and just really raise the vibration of the world when we come together.
Yeah.
And so having a place that's positive and kind and encouraging and not so reactionary and emotional, which is what typically you'll see this in this new world online, is really good. And so I think it's important to I'm going to stay on top of that because I want to maintain
Yeah.
that vibe in the
Yes.
group.
Yeah. No, I think, and that's really important because that's what attracts people. Because I've joined groups before, and as soon as you start to see that negativity or the, like, oh, you just get out. You're like, I don't need to see this. There's enough of this
Yeah.
everywhere else on the internet. I don't
Yeah.
need it here.
Yeah. And I think it's possible to live in the world and not be so consumed by that. And so, there's a lot of critics of social media and what it can do to us. And there are negative side effects. But I think if we can control our social media like we can control our lives
Yeah.
and let in what's healthy and let
Take
not
away what's not.
allow the negative stuff, then it can be a positive tool.
Exactly, exactly. So for me, one of the things that I love is travel. Okay. So I'm a big travel person and I know you are as well. So I just wanted to touch on the fact that you said you always wanted to live in Latin America. So for me, I always knew that I wanted to live overseas. So I moved to Thailand. And when you said that you moved to Mexico, I was like, that's amazing. I think all up, must have spent almost 2 months in and around Mexico and traveling around. And I loved it. I just had such a great time. And, I love people were like, are you sure you want to go to Mexico? And now I can't recommend it highly enough. It's just such a fun country. And I think for me, one of the things that I like about travel and international retreats in particular is that it gets you out of your day to day. It gets you out of your zone of, okay, I have to get up, I have to get the kids ready, I have to go to work or do the shopping or whatever it is that you're doing. Once you get on a plane and go somewhere else and you get off and you're in a totally different culture, a totally different environment, your whole brain, your perspective shifts and you see another side of the world, you see another side of yourself. And for me, that's really important because otherwise we just get stuck in the hamster wheel of this is how I've done it, this is how I've always done it, and this is what I'll just keep doing. And so for me, I can't tell people enough to go and travel or to go and live somewhere else or go and have an experience overseas. So I just want to know if you agree with that perspective.
Oh my gosh, 100%. I learned Spanish by traveling with an organization through all of South America.
Yeah.
I spent 6 months there in my 20s. I went to Nicaragua for the first time when I was 19 years old. And if it weren't for that trip,
Yeah.
I would not be here today. That particular trip in when I was 19 years old
Yeah.
transformed me in such a way that I knew at that point
Yeah.
that I would learn Spanish
Yeah.
and then that I would live in Latin America at some point. It was so transformational. And so travel is, I would say, one of the number one things that would change the world that would also make the world a more positive
Yeah.
place because we would be coming together.
Yeah.
And a lot of people who have these opinions about other places have never even been there.
Yeah. I agree.
And
Yeah.
so once you fall in love with people of different and learn and experience different things, that is everything. I
Yeah.
mean, so yeah, my traveling is I would say, and in fact, I've actually said, wouldn't it be amazing instead of going straight to the university, if every student who graduates high school had to spend 2 years, volunteering in kind of like the Peace Corps or
Yeah.
something, where they would have to volunteer for a couple of years somewhere else
Mm.
just to experience the world.
Yeah.
Because honestly, what it does is it teaches us that we are a lot more alike. Our
Then we
hearts are
realize.
so much alike. Yes, we're different. We have different cultures. We have different food. We have different ways of communicating, but there are a lot of things that bring us together.
Exactly, exactly. So we have something a little bit of a a culture in Australia when you finish either high school or university, take a gap year and you can go to the UK. So a lot of people I know will go and go to Europe for a year or two, which is so
Yeah.
great because then you've got
Yeah.
that international experience, you know, because when
Yes.
I finished high school and started university at 17, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to be at 17. Like, how do I know what I want to be at 17? You know,
Right.
I feel like that's a really important part of growing up, you know, experiencing those cultures because
Mhm.
the later you do that, the less exposed you are. So yeah, I'm glad that you agree because yeah, Mexico is one of my favorite places. Mexico, Colombia, Guatemala, and then a lot of Asia. I love Asia. So for me, that's really important. Yeah, but how was it living in Mexico?
Well, I, I, I mean, I lived in an area I didn't know that there were as many expats, Americans living there,
Ah, okay.
that because it isn't far from the States, it's only 3 hours south of San Diego. But I had always gone with volunteer groups. And so I knew Mexican locals. I didn't know that there was this whole group of retired Americans that live in this
Ah,
particular
yeah.
area. And so I still didn't really spend that much time in that area,
Yeah.
with, because they were mostly older. We were young, in our early 30s.
Yeah.
And but it was incredible. I mean, I changed so much in so many ways.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is, learning what it's like to be as a white woman in the world, a privileged white woman, to live in, what it's like to be in minority, number one.
Yeah.
um what it's like to have people surprised all the time that you speak their language,
Yeah.
which, and that's more of a tricky thing about the United States. I don't know if it's true in Australia, but Americans don't know, most Americans don't know more than one language,
Yeah.
because English is,
The main.
but Europeans know two and three and four
Yeah.
languages, right? Other countries know so many languages. And so for an American to know a second language, a white female blonde American
Yeah.
to know a second language is like so shocking, which is actually kind of sad.
Yeah.
So that was always interesting. And then the biggest part of my story, was that we started supporting other organizations when we first got there, just to learn.
Yeah.
And we worked with an orphanage. And so there were 5 siblings at this orphanage that their mother had actually put them in the orphanage, in order to survive, because she was a single mother with 5 children. She worked in the fields.
Mm.
The local fields, they are the fields that actually produce most of the southern southwest of the US, all of our cucumbers and tomatoes and produce.
Yeah.
And so my so these 5 children that were in this orphanage, their mother actually died,
Oh,
um, and then they were really orphans, and there's 5 siblings,
yeah.
and who's going to adopt 5 Mexican siblings?
Yeah.
And well, my husband and I did. We ended up falling in love with these kids, and
Yeah.
knowing, just it was one of my the times in my life where I knew these are my kids.
Yeah.
Just like when I knew I had to learn Spanish and I knew I had to move to Mexico, I knew that these were my kids.
Yeah.
And silly things like my husband's favorite number was 5, and there were 5 kids, and it was crazy. Everything we did, a lot of people would think, is crazy. Did
Yeah.
we have the means? Did we, we were living in another country, we were young,
Yeah.
we were running an organization. No, we did not have the means, but I knew that I was supposed to do it.
Yeah.
And so not long after that, I got pregnant.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
so then I had 6 children living in Mexico, with 6 children, running a nonprofit. And so my whole world, you do change when you live other places and when you experience, I have children whose first language is a different language than mine. And so it was a wild ride.
Yes.
And I'm grateful. If I knew then what I know now, I mean, woo, it's been a lot,
Yeah.
but I've always known that they were supposed to be our kids. It was
Yeah.
so strange.
Yeah.
This like knowing that internal
Yep.
intuition.
Yep. Yep. And we've talked about this a little bit, like in terms of doing the things that maybe society will say, what are you doing that for? And that doesn't make sense. And it's, if you write it down on paper, you would never do it. But inside, you're
Right.
like, I have to do this. It just
Right.
doesn't, for me, it doesn't make sense to not do it. I can't explain it. Like for me, it was giving up an amazing job and career and going, okay, well, I'm going to go volunteer overseas. I had the job, I had the career, I had everything set up. And it was just like, I have to do this. I can't not do this, and it's the same for you. You just got to go and do what it is that you have to do. But I think it's people, not saying that we're necessarily brave or anything like that, but if you can start to trust what you have to do, then that leads to, for me, that leads to happiness and fulfillment and all of those things that are important in life, So I always love meeting other people who are like, okay, this doesn't make sense, but this is what I want to do. And I'm like, go for it, do it. Like that would be
Yes.
my advice, is that just go and do it. Just go and live that life.
And I would say the second point of that is let go of all the people who tell you you're crazy, and let go of what other people think.
Yeah.
Because that is another part that was really hard for me.
Yeah.
That, a lot of criticism, especially when we went through difficult times after making some of those decisions, which now I can say, wow, it makes for an even better story.
Yes.
But no, I didn't follow all of the societal rules, and I still never, I don't own a house. I've never owned a house. I've been a renter my whole life, and I've been gone from here to here to here to here. And, but I'm rich in so many things. And there are things that I will, sometimes I do think like, oh man, if I started saving money and being really responsible at 20 something, then my life would look different now. But I also wouldn't still be now allowing myself to start something new, in my late 40s.
Yes. And so let's touched on that. So let's dive into that a little bit. I know that you want to pivot a little bit and do something new. So how do you feel about doing something new and different, I guess, after you've had, this life that you've already had? How are you feeling about that?
I know that it's definitely, I really do listen to what I'm being led to do, right? So I know that that's what I'm supposed to do. And it took me a couple of years to get to that point. And I honestly had no idea how many people were in this industry. I mean, I've led groups for 20 years to Mexico, and I've always, and actually I have a background in, my husband and I have a background in, 20 years ago, we were involved in a church. And so we've done a lot of these group leading, building activities. And so that's very comfortable for me.
Yeah.
And I've also done the wellness part sort of on my own. And so it's a little scary because I don't have all of the certifications and all of the, the
Boxes.
all of these years of experience. But I know I'm supposed to do it. And I know that my whole life has been about bringing people together. And so it's actually easier, I think, to bring a bunch of women together than it is, I've worked with teenagers and people from different countries. And so, I started this without even knowing. I had my first retreat a couple of years ago. Yeah. And honestly, I started this retreat page as my own personal page.
Yeah.
For my retreats.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what would happen. And so now I think my only it's not fear, it's more not knowing exactly what next step to take. Because in my past, I always knew exactly what I wanted, and I just was like, okay, I'm going to do this and this and this, and now I'm not sure of every step.
Yes.
And so now it's like, okay, I'm trying to be patient and listen and know that I still have a whole lifetime ahead of me, and I don't have to rush into it.
Yes.
Rushing into it is not going to that's not helpful. Like trusting the timing is what I'm and I'm a doer, and I'm a go getter.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's hard for me to be patient with the timing, but that's what I'm doing, and I'm just waiting for the right thing at the right time. And then you know, so when you came to ask me, did you find me on the wellness retreats?
Oh, no, I think I found you in another group where you said you were interested in doing some
Yeah,
podcast
yeah,
interviews.
exactly. Okay. So someone told me to do that. They
Yeah.
said, go on this Facebook group.
Yeah.
You need to tell your story.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, I'm gonna tell my story. And they say, just keep telling your story until you know the next step comes. And so not long after that, we talked, and I said, okay, I'm just going to keep telling my story, and telling, also I think encouraging people to keep going,
Yeah.
because sometimes it doesn't sprout up, sometimes it takes a long time, and that's timing is something we put in our heads. And so really it's about, it doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter when you start, it doesn't, you just have to keep going, and having faith that the right thing will come at the right time.
But I think also you're building on that. So once you start, the first podcast interview you do, like I remember my first one, I was like, oh my gosh, like you don't have all the right equipment, you don't necessarily know what to say, you mess it up, and then you realize, oh, it doesn't matter. And then the next time you get on, it's just that little bit easier, So each time you're
Exactly.
building on it, and maybe it'll take a year, maybe it'll take 6 months, but who knows? But
Mhm.
eventually, it just gets that little bit easier. And I think understanding that it takes time is really important, because the only way to fail then is to quit, is to not do it. But I think there's a lot of instant gratification in today's world. Like you can get
Oh,
anything you want like this. You can order food. You can, scroll and get whatever information you need. Whereas maybe I'm probably a little bit older than you, but maybe you're like where you had to go to the library and look things up. And if you wanted to order a pizza, you had to ring up on the old school home phone, and you had dial-up internet. There wasn't that, instant gratification. And I always try and remember that, like, these things take time. It's not going to happen like that. And maybe it does, but it doesn't always mean that it's going to happen like that.
well, I think that's actually really interesting, because that sort of resonates with me, because I'm also trying to figure out exactly how my retreats are going to be,
Yeah.
because partly because of that instant gratification idea, right? So these ultra luxury retreats, that's good, that's fun, that's wonderful, especially for people who've never experienced that. But there's a part of me that wants to not have it be uncomfortable in any way,
Yeah.
but to not necessarily rely
Yeah.
on all of the luxury
Yeah.
for that gratification, and to sort of say, okay, let's sit and learn how to be, and learn all of this stuff. Of course, I want beautiful views, and I want people to have a relaxation and
Yeah.
experience something. But there is a part of me that's like, well, how much luxury do I want? And what's healthy? And, and also, if I go to this ultimate luxury retreat and then I come home, I'm wah, wah, wah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out what mine are going to look like. And I know that mine also will always have a service element, especially when we're in another country, because I think that's really important to remember
Yeah.
how much we have, and how privileged we are, and also just honoring the culture and place that you're visiting. So so that's how, I think people will come on the group, and they'll say, how do I know if it's right, or how do I know if it's legit? And most of the women who are on there often will say, you find what fits with you, you find what feels right for you. And so, you know that's where I want to deal kind of with that gratification, that instant gratification, as a part of retreats.
Yeah.
Because I think, literally like putting the phone away,
Yeah.
and just like learning to be, and not, and maybe getting a journal, or maybe not, and maybe also not talking,
Yeah.
just like having quiet time, and really remembering, like going back to the basics, I guess.
Yeah. But that's where you have to run a retreat that works for you. Like for me,
Mhm.
I have to run a retreat. Like I'm going to Thailand, and from Australia, most people will go to Bali because Bali's closer. Well,
Right.
everybody goes to Bali, and I don't want to do what everyone's doing. And I lived
Right.
in Thailand, and that's what I love. And I want to be showcasing that. And that feels good for me. And so if I go somewhere or do something that doesn't fit for me, you're going to be able to see it because I'll be like, okay, here we go. We're going here. Whereas now I'm like, I'm so excited to go to Thailand and show you where I lived and all the things that I know from this amazing place that changed me.
Where do I sign up?
You can come with us.
Oh my gosh, that's a dream. That's definitely on my top five,
Yeah.
top five of my top 10 places to visit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing. Like I lived in
Yeah.
Thailand for 2 years and it totally changed who I am and the trajectory of my life. And I want
Hmm.
other people to experience that. So if I was to take them to Bali, that doesn't don't there's nothing wrong with Bali, but I want to do something different. So do you know what I mean? So
Right.
it's about finding that the style that works for you. Because if you
Yeah.
don't, your guests aren't going to love it for sure.
Right. Well, and mine, I have that similar feelings because so many people go to Tulum, like Tulum, 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 right? And I get it. There's great energy. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. And I have a little bit of imposter syndrome when it comes to, because my little place is just right over the border. And so it doesn't have this fancy reputation, but it's so, people don't know it's so beautiful, and it's very rustic, and it's very me, right? And so um it's just interesting because I have to do what's me, and I can't be intimidated by the people who do it differently, right? So, but that's real, that sometimes creeps up.
Yeah. And it's important to acknowledge that because everybody thinks, oh, I have to do it a certain way or it has to, because you can see people who show up and they don't necessarily love it or it's not them. You can see it. They come, hi, I'm thinking of doing a blah, as opposed to people who are like, I really want to do this. I've got no idea how to do it, but this is going to be amazing. Do you know what I mean? Like they show
Right.
up differently. So
Right.
that's,
Right.
one of the biggest things that I say to people is like, do what you love first because that's what people are going to be able to tell. Like they're going to be able to be around you and be like, oh, wow, she's really into this versus, oh,
Right.
she's just pushing this to make money or this is something that she has to do.
Right. 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 Right.
For sure. So you're going to be running retreats in Mexico, I know, which is going to be
Mhm.
amazing. What else is going on for you that is, I guess, a different than what you've done in the past? Like we touched on, okay, how do you make those changes and how do you, okay, I want to do something different. What are people going to think? Is this going to be right? How am I going to know what the right next step is? Is that something that you wanted to talk a little bit about now?
Sure. Of course.
Well, I think for me, it's just about normalizing I don't maybe know what I want to do next, and that's okay. Because especially, I think when you hit 40, for me, it was like, what do I want to do? I don't want to necessarily do what I've been doing in the past. And people sort of expect you to have your shit together and know what you want to
Yeah.
do. And I'm like, well, I'm not really sure yet. I'm just figuring it out. So I
Yeah.
know that I guess I just wanted to normalize that point that you don't have to know what you want to do. It's just do something, take that step and then go, okay, is this right? If it is, great. If it's not, okay, well then we'll just change and pivot to something else.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I know the direction I'm heading in,
Yeah.
but I don't have the details. And I do love details. I'm an artist, and um, you know, the little things that I think about.
Yeah.
I literally think about the little basket I'm going to give to
Oh,
every retreat person, because I make my own bath salts and body butters, and I'm going to put a crystal in there, and I'm going to do my jewelry. And I've always loved hospitality. Um, from the days when I had a retreat center in when we were living in Mexico for volunteer groups, and
yeah.
every color that I painted on the wall. Long term, for sure, my big dream is to buy a piece of land off the coast of Baja,
Yep.
drivable maybe from San Diego, and I want to do an off the grid solar power, eco-friendly sauna,
Yeah.
saltwater hot tub, jacuzzi, and build something from scratch. And
Right.
what's interesting is I've already bought property in Mexico through my organization, and so I have a lot of I know how to cross the border. I know how to deal with the police. I know how to
Yeah.
guide people. I know, so I feel really confident in that because I lived there and I know the culture and I feel comfortable there.
Yeah.
What's interesting is I feel totally solid about that. But there's this other dream that I have that I'd like to find someplace in California as well. But I do have more of a fear factor for California because it's a whole different ball game,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's 20 times the price. So for me, the thing that I'm still working on is my learning to get over the money and scarcity
Yeah.
issues that I have learned that I'm letting go of them, but they still creep up sometimes.
Yeah. Oh,
So
it's always the way. It's like for me, there's certain areas of my life where I'm like, yep, manifest, yep, yep. And then other areas where you just like you're stuck and you're like, why? What is going on? But at least
yeah,
identifying those and going, all right, that's something that I've got to work on is a great
yes.
start. And I would
But
definitely say if it's something that you love and want to do, then definitely don't let go of it. Like just
well,
work.
and even just living here in San Diego was a gift. I mean, we were living in Las Vegas with
Oh,
our 6 kids. This is 9 hours from my organization. When we left Mexico, we moved to Las Vegas
yeah.
because we had 6 kids
Yeah.
and California housing, it was just way more affordable. And so we went to Vegas and I could work in Vegas with the other side gigs that I do. And I would drive 9 hours
Wow.
and to go to my organization in Mexico. And that's also when my husband and I transitioned and I sort of took it over
Yeah.
completely on my own. And I would drive from Vegas, I would drive on the 15 that goes from Las Vegas all the way to San Diego. And every time I would come over this hill, right below Temecula, I would come through down the 15 on my way to Mexico, and I would see these big, beautiful mountains. And I would say, I want to live here someday. I want to live here someday. And I didn't worry about when, I didn't know how.
Yep.
And years later,
Here you are.
my husband got a job and he was literally his workplace was literally right off that highway. And we got a house right off that highway. And I mean, it's like but I wasn't even, I didn't know or care when.
Yeah.
So now I do know I want fruit trees and I know the area that I want the land in. And I do want to have something in California as well. For a person who's never bought a house or bought anything, I'm like a free little bird, but I do want to own land in California. And again, crazy, right? People say, you live in California? Why would you live in California? It's so expensive. San Diego, it's one of the most expensive cities in the US. Well, I'm supposed to be here.
Yep.
So that's why I'm here.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, it definitely sounds like you're meant to be in San Diego. I mean, and I do hear a lot of stories about people going, this just happened to me and it was never supposed, like, I never thought that I'd be able to do it. I always just like almost wished for it. You know what I mean? I think that's
Yes.
amazing because that's when you're expressing what you truly want. When you think there's no chance of it happening, you've got no fears around it. You're like, well, it's never going to happen. So I'm going to say, I'm going to live in San Diego or I'm going to be an astronaut or whatever it is, because you're not attached to the outcome. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's really great.
Yeah, it was amazing. And even a little story that goes with the house that we're living in, we could not get approved because in San Diego, you have to make 3 times. You have to prove that you make at least 3 times what you have to pay for rent, or at least this was when we moved here.
Yeah.
And we could not get approved. We didn't have good credit, all these things. And then my husband reached out to a friend
Yeah.
who basically said he has some connections in the real estate world,
Yeah.
and he called in a favor. And when we called the rental agency,
Yeah.
the gentleman we talked to, he said, pick a house on our website. And my husband started saying, okay, well, just so you know, the numbers aren't going to look good, but I can make sure that, this is my salary. And
Yeah.
he's like, just pick a house. And my husband was like, but our credit, it's not going to be, it's not
Yeah.
as high as you might want. And the guy's like,
Just
you don't have to give me your credit. You have the house. If this person vouches for you, you get to move into this house. I mean,
wow.
there have been so many miracles throughout my life like that
Yeah.
that are just literally, when I wish I would have manifested more money back in the day, when I had all my kids at home.
Yeah.
But I tell you, more often than not, at the end of the month, when I didn't know how everything was going to work out,
Yeah.
taking care of 6 kids, it always did.
Yeah.
And so now I'm living in a whole different time of my life where I only have one child at home now.
Yeah.
I have way more time.
Yeah.
Well, things do get easier for women out there it is not easy to have a ton of young kids at home.
Oh,
It's hard.
Yeah.
And so, there's also excitement for each decade of our lives. So I'm actually excited for the next couple of decades of my life because I feel like it's a new chapter that I get to do. I have different types of freedoms that I didn't have, 10, 20 years ago.
Yes. Yeah. No,
And
that's
I'm a different person.
yes. And that's like I listened to this interview with Jane Fonda, and she said she looks at her life like 3 acts, like 0 to 30, 30 to 60, and 60 to 90, I guess. And she's like, I'm in my 3rd act now. She's like, but when I started my 3rd act, I was like, oh well, that's the end, of what I can do. And she was around 60, and she's like, oh my God, I had another 20, 30 years type thing.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm only like in my 2nd act. I've got so much time.
Yes.
And it's like anything is possible if I want to do it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that's for
Absolutely.
me the thing, especially for mums who are like, oh, well, I'm a mom and that's what I do and I go to work. I'm like, well, what do you want to do? Because at some point, you're going to have more time and maybe the kids will leave and what is it that you want to do that lights you up,
Right. And I think women don't even allow themselves to
Yeah.
think about those things. It's like we're restricted. Well, this is my responsibility and this is what I want. And those are the things that I want to encourage
Yeah.
in women. Number one, to not just continue, not just give until you break.
Yeah.
Because that's not helpful for anybody.
Yeah.
But also, being hopeful about each decade and each new thing. We're not stuck. We have choices. We have the world is our oyster.
Yeah. I mean, I think I gave you the example. So when I was working, I was in not-for-profit, and my role was fundraising, and people would often want to come and give their time, and that was lovely. And I would say to people, that's great, but if you can give me $50 instead of spending 3 hours, that's going to be better for everyone. If you can, I wouldn't obviously ask people who couldn't afford it, but I'm able to do more with that $50, and you're not burning yourself out spending 3 hours each day coming in here and doing that, So it's about going, okay, what is the best way that I can look after me, and you mentioned money, and money is a big thing, especially, I guess, for a lot of women. And if you can imagine if you could make, let's just pull the figure of $1 million out just for the sake of the argument. You can then donate. It doesn't make you a bad person. You can potentially donate a lot of that and make more of a difference by looking after you first and then giving half of that away, as opposed to going, oh, well, I can't do that. I've got to serve everyone else and then serve me last, because then you'll fall over. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm trying to get my point across is that once you look after you and what it is that makes you happy, then you have the capacity to give to others.
Well, yeah, it's like you cannot fill other people's cups with an empty cup. I mean, you have to also, it's about caring for yourself and not being so hard on yourself. I mean, I was so hard on myself for so many years, like in a very unhealthy, kind of a mean way. I would never treat other people the way I treated myself.
Isn't it funny we do that? Yeah, it's crazy.
And I remember I remember one time I this is a part that I didn't mention, that I was an auto show spokesmodel
Fun.
for Toyota. So I
Okay.
worked for Toyota and I would go around the country. This is also while I lived in Mexico. I would leave
Wow.
Mexico, I would get on a plane, I would fly to Chicago and do the Chicago Auto Show. And I
Okay.
would put on an I would leave like working with the poor. I
Hmm.
would go cross the border. I would put on an Armani suit.
Oh,
And
wow.
then I'd be on a stage talking about the new Toyota with a 3.5 liter V8 or, V6 and all these things. And I remember standing on one of the platforms at an auto show, and it
Yeah.
was in the midst of, I lived in Mexico. I had this traveling job. I had 6 kids at home. I had no idea how I was going to make it or survive. And I remember thinking to myself, if you were your best friend, what would you say to yourself?
Yeah.
You certainly wouldn't say, you're not doing enough, keep going, do harder, work harder. You'd
Yeah.
say, you need a break.
Yeah.
You've done a lot of great things. And I think learning to love ourselves, and I don't necessarily even mean spoiling ourselves or like it, just learning to like really love yourself and not need everybody else's opinion or
Yeah.
uh everyone else's what do I want to say?
Judgment, advice.
They're just having them say yes, approval,
Pleasing them.
not having other people's approval, and just doing what you need to do for you and loving yourself. Because all these years I spent not like being hard on myself,
Yeah.
and having these like ridiculous expectations,
Yeah.
which is actually a form of arrogance. If you have higher expectations for yourself than everybody else,
Yeah.
that's kind of, and
Yeah.
so for me, I'll never forget that moment because I was at a breaking point.
Yeah.
And I literally couldn't be hard on myself anymore because I was like, look at what you're
Yeah.
doing.
Yep. Yep.
And so if we can harness that sort of love
Yeah.
and still, push ourselves in a healthy, loving way,
Yeah.
and to be disciplined, but also care for ourselves and do what we need to do,
Yeah.
we can do anything.
I remember listening to someone talk about self-care once, and I had always heard self-care referred to as like, get your nails done and have a bubble bath, and that's kind of not really me as such.
Right.
So, but then someone said, self-care can just be saying no to something that you don't want to do, and I was like, oh, that's good. I could do that kind of, you know what I mean? Like if that's what self-care is,
Yes.
I can say no, I don't actually want to do that, or no, So I think it was
Yes.
really powerful when I was like, oh, I'm allowed to say no, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I would say the newer, younger generations are better at that than
Yeah.
we are.
Yeah.
And I think I jokingly say maybe we can find a balance between our crazy work ethic and your like constant self-care. Maybe we can learn from each other. I think it's
Yeah.
beautiful when uh different generations of women come together and learn from each other. I think there's a lot we can learn
Yeah.
from younger women
Yeah.
who will not take the stuff that we used to take. They'll be like, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
And I go, oh, what?
I know you
Do
said
that.
no.
Well, I'm like, well, but don't but you're supposed, no, there is no supposed to.
Yep. I don't have.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of really cool young women who have a lot of, great things.
Yes.
So I do, but I do also think that older generations and, sort of like we can be strong about things. And I like that, the strength and we can handle things.
Yeah.
I love that we can all learn from each other. And,
Yeah.
that's another often discussed topic on women's wellness retreats.
Yeah.
Sometimes older women won't want to be with younger women.
Yeah.
And so it's really interesting because I think that we all have a lot to learn from each other.
Yeah. And I think as well, where there's a point of resistance, that's probably where there's something to learn or to work through because, why?
Well,
Didn't you want to?
yeah. And the other thing that there's a resistance about is the people who don't want to do yoga.
Oh, yeah.
They really don't want to do yoga. And I've always wanted to sort of comment on some of these
Yeah.
things and say, maybe you need to do,
Yeah.
have you tried yoga?
Yeah.
I am in no way a yogi.
Yeah.
Um, but I do know that when I do yoga,
Yeah.
it's like one of the only things physically that like is a spiritual,
Yeah.
meditation and yoga is so good for your soul, your body, for,
Yeah.
it's almost like maybe you do need to do it. I mean, I
Yeah.
feel like everybody should do it. And in fact, it's one of those things that when I'm not doing it, I feel
You notice
different.
it. Mm.
And I'll even, I hurt more. And my husband will be like, have you been doing yoga? And I'll be like, don't
No.
say that. uh, so if I take a few days off, I can make, it's a huge difference, but it's also mental, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of like working out for the right reasons. Like
Yeah.
when I was young, I worked out
Yeah.
because I had this job where I had to look a certain way and I had to be a certain size. And I'm no longer that size and I don't look that way anymore, but I want to work out for the right reasons. But
Yeah.
I had a lot of unhealthy connections
Yeah.
to working out and eating and the pressure of looking a certain way, when really the number one reason why I should work out is mental health.
Yeah. That's right. Because it makes you feel good.
Right. And it really, I mean, I'm prone to anxiety, and it's in the number one thing that helps is actually physical things with your body.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I always find that when people say when you're feeling stressed or anxious or in a stuck situation, go and move your body. And I sometimes like, I don't want to move my body. I'm like, Haley, that's by doing that, you're releasing endorphins and you're literally solving the problem by moving your body. But
and we don't want to do it. And that's why it's almost like we want to stay stuck.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I'll say that to my daughter all the time, like, just go take a walk. She's like, she knows I'm right, but she's stubborn and she doesn't want to, but I also I do the same thing to myself.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to do work instead.
Yeah. There's always work to do. And I'm like, no, go out and go for a walk because it just for your mental health, go and like but your body literally releases these little endorphins that zip around your body and be like, let's get happy. You know what I mean?
Yes. It's science. It is proven.
I'm still resisting it.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I meant. That's what I mean by the level or the balance between discipline and self-care sometimes may mean doing something that's not comfortable.
Exactly. Oh, well, when people say to me, oh, I want to manifest or I want to get this, blah, and they're like, oh, but it's hard. I'm like, but you have to focus on the end goal. Like you can't, I'm never saying it's going to always be easy. Like you still have to do either physical work or emotional work or mental work or whatever it is, but you've got to focus on the end goal if that's what you really want. And if you're not prepared to do the work, then you can't really want that thing. Do you know what I mean?
Right. How badly do you actually want it?
Exactly.
I think though that sometimes would you say it's like you're afraid of the thing that you want the most.
Oh yeah. Yep.
I mean, there are things that I'm like, oh yeah, I want this and I want this. And but then when the big, like success, right? Financial success for me is scary.
Yeah.
Is literally scary for me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but I've worked through this.
It's your subconscious.
And then I'm like, well, do I want it? I don't know. I want it to be I want more breathing room.
Yeah.
I want more freedom. I do want more financial freedom.
Redefine what that means to you, because if you're saying that, I want more, like I want $1 million, your brain's going to freak out. But if you say I want more financial freedom, your brain might be able to cope with that and go, oh, okay, cool, I can deal with this. But I mean, I definitely see that when you're getting closer to something, more resistance pops up because you're getting closer and your brain's like, are you sure this is what you want? Your subconscious
Exactly.
You told me that this is scary all of the time and now we're doing it. What are you crazy?
Right. And then it's like you identify.
Yeah.
I'm the person, I know that earlier you said, the more money you have, the more you can help, but I'm the person that's sort of like, I can live on a super low budget. I'm the person who goes to the thrift store and transforms a piece of furniture and makes it look amazing. And so I have value and like there's some of my self-worth
Yeah.
is in that resourcefulness. And
Yeah.
so it is scary for me to redefine myself,
Yes.
you
Yes.
know. Um,
It's just identifying those beliefs around whatever it is you want and identifying the negative things around and going, is this really what I believe, or is someone passed this down to me and it's not
right.
actually serving me? That's what
Yeah.
I
Oh
see.
no, it was totally passed to me. I mean, it was,
Yeah.
I know that.
Yeah. It's the same for most people. It's like whatever lens we're looking through, it's not our actual lens, it's what we've been passed down. Like it's our
Right.
parents, it's the way they looked at something and they were doing the best that they could and they thought this is the way they did it, so they passed it on to us, and then we've taken it on board thinking that that's the way it is. But if you take those glasses off, you're like, oh wow, actually people who have money, they're not necessarily all bad and they do some great stuff, and maybe I could be, do you know what I mean? It's just about
Mhm.
being open enough to take the glasses off and go, am I willing to do the work and let go of some of those things that I was holding on to that I feel like keep me safe.
Right.
It can
Right.
be
And I
hard.
know that's where I am right now,
Yeah.
where, you know yourself well enough that you're like, okay, I'm feeling the resistance.
Yeah.
I'm recognizing that.
Yeah.
So, how do we keep moving past these, so it's something that you always are working on. Is that right?
Yes. 100%. Because as soon as you attain one goal, you're probably going to want another one, or you're going to want to stretch yourself in some area because you're going to get to a certain, level of comfort. And then your brain's like, okay, well, what can we do now? What do we need to do? We need some more excitement. We need some more variety, how do I make that happen? And so it's just an ongoing cycle, So,
Hmm.
I mean, for me, I've noticed that. So I fly out to Thailand tomorrow and I've been there, I've lived there, all of these things, but still there's resistance been coming up over the past couple of weeks. Are you sure that this is what you want to do, Haley? Are you sure? Have you thought about this? Do you know what I mean? And I'm like, it's okay. It's just new and different. We're okay.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So identifying that and acknowledging that I'm having these thoughts, and I'm like, no, it's okay. We're all good. Let's go. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
if you
Yes.
don't identify and give those thoughts some airtime, they're just going to get bigger and louder. It's like, a little child in your head. And as soon as you sit
Mhm.
down with them and say, hey, it's okay, I'll keep you
Mhm.
safe, we're all good.
Right. And I had a coach that was like, no, literally touch yourself and
Yeah.
say, you're okay.
Yeah.
You're safe.
Yeah.
Look at, oh, and the other thing she taught me was look at the evidence from the past.
Yeah.
Look at all the things that you have manifested so far.
Yeah.
Just look at the evidence.
Yeah.
It's not, it's nothing new. You've already done this. It's
Yeah.
just in a different form.
Yep. 100%. Yes. Well, this has been amazing. I've loved our chat. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank
I hope it wasn't
you.
too painful for you. But I think we had some really good little gold nuggets in there and such a great chat. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Of
I
course.
can't wait to do your money manifestation.
Woo, my money manifestation. Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, I have a manifesting money mindset course. It's just an hour long. It's a masterclass, just some really easy ways to shift your mindset around money and identifying some past beliefs that you have that maybe aren't serving you anymore. So it's a really great little short course. I also have the Manifestation Essentials course, which is a longer form course, and it's self-paced, so you can jump on and work through the 5 steps that I have in my manifestation process. But the only other thing that I want to say is that I'm flying to Thailand tomorrow. So for those of you who are interested in retreats, make sure you join Abby's group. It's Women's Wellness Retreats. I'll tag it in the bottom as well. Abby's doing one in, I think it's August. Is that right? Are you
Mhm.
doing one in August? And mine will be probably November. I'll let you know as of next week. I'm going out tomorrow to look at villas and confirm dates and all of that exciting stuff. So stay tuned. But thank you so much, everybody, for listening. And thank you, Abby, for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.